Hey there, traveller. Tonight, we begin a long, candlelit journey into the mists of time. A story of kings and storms, of quiet monasteries and roaring longships, of an island that would one day call itself England. But tonight's story starts not with fire and swords, but with silence. The kind of silence that follows when a great empire takes its last breath. So, get comfortable. Maybe dim your lights, light a candle if you have one, and let the glow dance against the walls. Take a deep breath and listen. You're about to step into a world that was ancient even to the Vikings. The year is somewhere around 410 AD. You wake to the faint sound of rain tapping against the broken tiles of a villa roof. Around you, moss creeps across what used to be marble floors. The Roman eagle, once proud and golden, is fading on the wall. For nearly 400 years, Britain has been a province of Rome. Legionaries once marched its roads, tax collectors once counted its grain, and governors once ruled from their grand villas. But now, there are no legions left. The emperor, far away across the sea, has called them home to defend a crumbling empire. And in the shadow they leave behind, everything begins to unravel. Outside, the countryside is dotted with old Roman towns. Bath, Lincoln, York still standing but slowly emptying, their bathhouses cold, their markets quiet. The local Britons, descendants of Celts and Roman soldiers alike, still wear their tunics and sandals, still whisper prayers to the old gods and the new. But trade has slowed to a trickle. The coins they once used, silver stamped with imperial faces, are losing meaning. Roads crumble, roofs collapse, and the question no one dares to speak aloud is, who rules now? For generations, the people of Britain had depended on Rome's power to keep them safe. But power is a strange thing. It doesn't disappear, it shifts. In the hills of Wales, in the forests of the north, and across the sea in Ireland, Denmark, other eyes begin to turn toward the island. The borders, once guarded by legions, are now only guarded by fear. And fear, as the centuries will show, is a poor wall. In the north, beyond Hadrian's Wall, the Picts stir tribes that the Romans could never quite tame. They move south again, testing the weakness of the land. From the west, Irish raiders strike across the sea, taking slaves and gold from the coasts of Cornwall and Wales. And from across the narrow channel to the east come whispers of movement warriors from the flat, cold lands of modern-day Denmark and northern Germany. The Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, peoples who speak a rough, alien tongue and worship fierce gods of war and sea. At first, the Britons welcome some of them. They are hired swords, mercenaries brought in to help defend against the Picts. But soon, the swords no longer need hiring. They simply stay. They bring their families, their herds, their longboats. They take land where there is room and take more where there isn't. You can imagine it, a small Saxon village rising beside the ruins of a Roman town. The old Latin inscriptions half buried under new wooden halls. Smoke from new fires rising into the same sky where Roman eagles once flew. By the 500s, the island is divided, a patchwork of little kingdoms ruled by men with names like Aelle, Cerdic, and Ida. In the east and south, Saxon kings rule over what was once Roman farmland. To the north and west, the old Britons still cling to their hills, keeping their own languages and legends alive. And in between them, where cultures mix, a new kind of people begins to emerge. You wander through these kingdoms, hearing the sounds of early English being born, a tongue that rolls off the tongue like gravel and river water. The people wear cloaks of wool and fur. They drink ale from wooden cups and tell stories by the hearth, of monsters, of heroes, of a world balanced between the Christian God and the older, wilder spirits of the earth. In the flickering firelight, the shadow of Beowulf's world begins to take shape. For nearly 3 centuries, these small kingdoms fight and grow, devour and divide. 7 great names rise from the chaos: Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, East Anglia, Kent, Sussex, and Essex. Later generations will call them the Heptarchy, the 7-crowned patchwork that ruled early medieval Britain. Each one vying for dominance, each one claiming divine right. For the people living through it, though, it's less divine and more brutal. Every border is written in blood, every peace is temporary. And yet, amidst all this strife, something remarkable begins to happen. These Anglo-Saxon peoples, once invaders, Now settlers start to build again. They clear forests, plant wheat, and raise timber halls on ancient Roman roads. They carve runes into stone, but they also begin to pray in Latin. Slowly, they adopt Christianity, the same faith the Romans had brought long ago. By the late 600 seconds, the island hums with both crosses and hammers. Pagan gods fade into memory, but never completely. Old habits die slowly when winter is long. Now, as you sit in the glow of your small candle, imagine the world they lived in. No great cities, no empire, no central rule. Just kingdoms of wood and smoke, of oaths sworn over mead, of raiders and monks living side by side on the edge of the known world. To the south lies the powerful realm of the Franks. Across the sea lies Scandinavia, a land of fjords, iron, and hunger. For now, those northern shores are quiet, but not for long. Because even as Mercia builds its dikes and Wessex forges its alliances across the cold waters, shipwrights are shaping something new. Sleek, fast, terrifying vessels with curved hulls and carved dragon heads, longships that can slice through a storm and slide up a river like a knife through cloth. The men who sail them are restless. They've begun to look westward, toward this divided island rich with monasteries, treasure, and unguarded coasts. The year is now 789. You stand on a Dorset beach and hear the sea whisper beneath the gulls. Out on the horizon, small shapes move 3, maybe 4 ships, the first of their kind to ever touch English soil. A local reeve rides down to greet them, thinking they are traders. But they are not traders. They are something far older. The reeve never rides home. And with that single act of blood, a new age begins, the age of the Vikings. So rest now, and let the candle burn low. The Romans are gone. The Anglo-Saxons rule a fragile peace. But over the waves, in the frozen fjords of Norway and Denmark, men are sharpening axes and carving gods into their prows. Tomorrow night, we'll meet them. We'll watch the first dragonships cut through the mist and bring fire to England's quiet shores. The sea still whispers of the first blood on the sand. When morning comes, the waves wash it away. But the story has already spread south through the villages, north along the coasts, carried by the mouths of frightened sailors and monks. The strangers from the sea were no merchants. They came with iron, not wares. And though few yet realise it, Britain has just heard the first faint heartbeat of a storm that will last for centuries. But for now, the island remains divided, a land stitched together by fragile kingdoms and fierce pride. As you wake in this new dawn, the year is somewhere in the early 700 seconds. The air smells of smoke and earth. You stand on a ridge, overlooking a patchwork of green fields and wooden halls. To the south, the rolling hills of Wessex glow with morning mist. To the north, the River Trent winds through the forests of Mercia. This is not a united country. It is 7 hungry wolves circling the same carcass. The 7 kingdoms of the Heptarchy Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, East Anglia, Kent, Sussex, and Essex are each ruled by men who dream of being Bretwalda, the wide ruler, the overlord of all the Anglo-Saxons. But being king here is not a stable profession. Power shifts with every sword drawn and every winter harvest. To the west, the old Brittonic tribes still cling to their mountain fortresses in Wales and Cornwall, whispering in a language older than Rome. To the north, the Picts and Scots fight like wolves in the mist. And to the east, across the North Sea, the cold eyes of Scandinavia are watching, waiting. But here, for a brief moment, the island turns inward. The Saxons and Angles have built kingdoms of surprising sophistication, laws, taxes, and armies held together by fragile alliances and blood oaths. The land is full of contrasts. Pagan feasts and Christian prayers, kings who consult bishops and soothsayers alike. You wander through the great hall of Mercia, under the rule of its mighty king, Offa. The air is thick with the smell of roasting meat and mead. Gold arm rings glitter on warriors' wrists as they boast of battles won on the Welsh border. Offa listens, smiling faintly, a man who understands that true power isn't in shouting, it's in waiting. He builds Offa's dyke, a vast earthwork that stretches across the Welsh border, hundreds of kilometres of raised soil and ditches, marking not just a frontier, but a message, a wall that says, "This is mine." Mercia, for now, is the beating heart of England. From his court, Offa controls trade routes, coinage, and diplomacy. Even the Franks across the sea treat him as an equal. And yet, as you walk through the marketplaces of his towns, Street Albans, Tamworth, and Gloucester, you can feel the edges fraying. Kingdoms like these always burn bright before they dim. Northumbria, once the cradle of English learning, glows with a different kind of fire. Its monasteries, Lindisfarne, Jarrow, and Whitby, are the jewels of the island. Here, monks copy holy texts, their candles flickering against parchment. The hum of quiet prayer fills the stone halls. One of them, a scholar named Bede, is writing The Ecclesiastical History of the English People, a book that will outlive every king alive today. It is a strange time, peaceful but tense. Like the pause between breaths, the kingdoms squabble endlessly, their borders shifting with every generation. Mercia and Northumbria fight for dominance in the Midlands, while Wessex, under its clever kings, quietly grows stronger in the south. You walk through a Saxon village at dusk. The people are poor, but proud. Their lives are bound to the seasons, sowing in spring, harvesting in autumn, praying for mild winters. Their huts are thatched and smoky, their tools simple but well made. They work the land their ancestors took by sword and now defend with hoe and axe alike. In their mead halls, the skalds sing of heroes men like Beowulf, who slayed monsters from the north. Yet the monsters they sing of now are real enough: hunger, plague, and the endless threat of war. Religion, too, is changing. Christianity has taken root, but the soil is still wild. In some places, churches rise beside the ruins of pagan groves. The people cross themselves in the day and hang Thor's hammer over the door at night. It is not contradiction, it is survival. The gods of the old world and the new share the same hearth here. But something stirs beyond the horizon. In the icy fjords of Norway and the islands of Denmark, population grows and food runs short. Chieftains eye new lands across the sea. They have heard tales of Britain's riches, its monasteries heavy with silver, its kings divided, its coasts unguarded. You sit by a fire in a Northumbrian monastery as an old monk reads aloud. He tells of signs in the heavens, eclipses, comets, strange weather. "The Lord is warning us," he whispers. You notice his hand trembling as thunder rolls far off over the sea. Then the winter comes harder, longer. The coasts freeze, and the fishermen speak of strange ships seen offshore. No one believes them. Britain has been raided before by Picts, by Irish, but these ships, they say, are different. Sleek, swift, shaped like dragons. By the late 700s, Offa's reign is ending. His kingdom is strong, but it has grown fat and overconfident. The monks of Lindisfarne go about their prayers, believing themselves safe behind faith and distance. Across the North Sea, the sons of Odin are sharpening axes and testing sails in the cold spray. They are not kings, yet only sea-wolves, prowling for prey. And then, one June morning in the year 793, the sky over Lindisfarne glows red. You stand on the shore, hearing the gulls screaming overhead. A faint rhythm comes from the horizon, the beat of oars on water. The monks hurry to the beach, thinking perhaps it is a trading fleet, perhaps brothers from Ireland. But as the ships draw nearer, their carved dragon heads glitter. In the sun, the first longship slides onto the sand, its warriors leaping out with shields of painted wood and spears that flash like lightning. Their shouts are unlike any tongue the monks have heard. The cross is no defence against iron. The monastery burns, its treasures are torn apart. The survivors are dragged screaming to the ships. For generations to come, the people of Britain will remember that day as the beginning of terror, the day the Northmen came. But this is only the beginning. Those first raiders will return again and again, and soon they will come not as pirates, but as conquerors. As night falls over the smoking ruins of Lindisfarne, the North Sea glimmers like steel beneath the moon. Somewhere out there, more dragon-headed ships are waiting for the right wind. The storm that Offa never saw coming is about to break over Britain. You can still smell the ashes of Lindisfarne. The sea has gone quiet now, as if even the waves remember what happened. The monastery lies in ruin, books turned to ash, crosses torn from the walls, the sand littered with broken chalices and the blood of the pious. The survivors whisper a word no one on this island has heard before: Viking, sea raiders, pirates, heathens from beyond the edge of the world. But this was not an isolated storm. It was the first lightning strike of a long and merciless tempest. As dawn rises over Britain's shattered peace, you find yourself standing on a cold cliff, looking east toward the dark line of the sea. Somewhere beyond that horizon, new ships are being built sleek, narrow, deadly. Their ribs are carved from pine and oak, their planks bound with iron rivets. The dragon heads on their prows are fierce and fanged, meant not only to frighten their enemies but to scare away the sea spirits of their own superstition. In the fjords of Norway, along the beaches of Denmark, and among the islands of Sweden, restless hands are at work. Blacksmiths hammer out swords that gleam like mirrors. Sailmakers stitch wool into vast red and white sails. Children watch their fathers disappear down to the docks each morning, whispering to one another about the lands beyond the mist, for the north is growing hungry. In Norway, rugged mountains and thin soil make life hard. There is not enough farmland to feed every family, and inheritance customs mean that younger sons get nothing. In Denmark, ambitious warlords jostle for power, forging alliances one year and breaking them the next. And all across Scandinavia, the lure of the sea, the promise of easy silver and fertile land pulls stronger than any king's law. So they begin to go Viking, a word that means not a people, but a practice, a way of life. To go Viking is to raid, to wander, to seek fortune and fame on the open water. Some go for gold, some for vengeance, some simply because it's what the sea calls them to do. Their ships are masterpieces of design, low enough to beach on any coast, light enough to carry across land, fast enough to outrun any pursuit. With shallow keels, they can slip up rivers and vanish again before an army can even form. They are built not just for travel, but for terror. When you see one rise out of the mist, it's already too late. The first few raids are small, quick strikes against monasteries and trading ports along Britain's northern coasts. They take what they can carry: silver chalices, livestock, women, and slaves. The monks' stories spread faster than the raiders themselves. To the Christian mind, these pagans seem almost supernatural men who laugh in battle, who pray to gods of thunder and death, who fear neither cross nor crucifix. But over the next few decades, something changes. What begins as a series of lightning raids becomes a storm of invasion. By the early 800s, the longships are striking deeper and wider. They hit the western isles of Scotland, the Irish coasts, and the rich towns of East Anglia. They learn the patterns of the seasons, raiding in summer, retreating to winter camps when the cold sets in. Some even begin to overwinter in Britain itself, building wooden fortresses and farming the land between attacks. You walk through one of these camps near the mouth of a river in Northumbria. The smell of smoke and roasting fish fills the air. The Norsemen sit around fires, their faces painted, their hair bound in braids, their weapons laid carefully beside them. They trade stories of past raids, each one trying to outdo the last, who burned the biggest monastery, who took the most gold, who fought the bravest. To them, this is not cruelty, it's glory. They are men of strange contradictions, ferocious in battle, but disciplined in craft, ruthless plunderers, but deeply loyal to their kin. In their sagas, a man's worth is measured not by mercy, but by memory. You live on, only as long as your deeds are sung. Meanwhile, across the sea in Britain, panic begins to spread. The kings of the Heptarchy send messages to one another, pleading for unity, but none can trust their neighbours. Mercia still eyes Wessex with suspicion. Northumbria is too weak to defend itself. When the raiders come, most kingdoms stand alone. In 836, King Egbert of Wessex faces them in battle near a place called Carhampton. The Norsemen fight like wild animals, their shield wall tight, their axes flashing like lightning in the rain. Egbert wins that day, but barely. His victory buys time, not peace. He knows it, even as he rides home beneath a sky the colour of ash. By the middle of the century, the raids have become an industry. Slave markets flourish from Dublin to York. Viking traders travel as far as the Mediterranean, selling furs, amber, and human lives. They are no longer just raiders, they are settlers. Ireland becomes dotted with Norse towns: Dublin, Waterford, Limerick. Scotland's northern islands fall under their rule, and the Isle of Man becomes a sea king's fortress. But England, rich and divided, remains the greatest prize of all. You stand on the shore of East Anglia as dawn breaks over the North Sea. The horizon is a thin silver line. Then movement, first a shadow, then another, then dozens more. Longships, hundreds of them, sailing together in perfect rhythm. The largest fleet the island has ever seen. It's the year 865. This time, they do not come for a monastery. They come for a kingdom. The great heathen army, as the terrified chroniclers will call it, is not a mere band of raiders, it is an invasion force. Thousands of warriors from every corner of Scandinavia, bound by oath and ambition. Among their leaders are men whose names will echo through the centuries. Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan Ragnarsson, Ubba, sons of the legendary sea king Ragnar Lothbrok. They land in East Anglia first, not to destroy it, but to use it. They take horses, food, and tribute. The local king, desperate to avoid slaughter, pays them off, but gold only fuels their hunger. Within months, they march north to York, the beating heart of Northumbria. The city is divided by civil war, its two rival kings fighting each other instead of the invaders. When the Norse arrive, the English barely manage to close the gates before the first attack begins. The battle is swift and brutal. The city falls, the two kings are captured. And in one of those grim, unforgettable moments that define an age, the Viking leaders execute their enemies with theatrical cruelty. The message is clear. The north now belongs to the Danes. York becomes Jorvik, a new capital for a new order. From here, the great army fans out across the island, south into Mercia, west into the Welsh borderlands, east toward the coast. Villages burn, kingdoms crumble, and for the first time, the English begin to fear extinction. But in the south, one small kingdom still stands. Wessex, quiet, pious, underestimated. Its people farm the land and pray for peace, as they always have. Yet within its wooden halls, a young prince is watching the horizon, studying the enemy, waiting for his turn. His name is Alfred, and soon the fate of all Britain will rest in his hands. The year is 866, and the air smells of smoke and iron. Across the island, word spreads like wildfire: York has fallen. The ancient seat of Northumbria, once home to saints and scholars, is now a Viking stronghold. Smoke curls from its rooftops, and foreign banners ripple above its walls. The sound of hammers echoes through the streets as the Danes fortify their new home. For the first time, the conquerors are not leaving. They are staying. From Jorvik, their control begins to ripple outward. The great heathen army moves like a living thing, shifting, dividing, striking without warning. To the monks and chroniclers who record these dark years, it seems less like a human army and more like a divine punishment. But to the men who lead it, Halfdan Ragnarsson, Ubba, Guthrum, it is opportunity, pure and simple. Britain is divided, and every border means another prize. In the north, the Vikings turn the once proud kingdom of Northumbria into their bastion. Its churches are gutted, its nobles enslaved or exiled, and its lands parcelled out to new masters. The language of the Norse begins to mix with the English tongue, words like sky, window, knife, slipping into speech as easily as raiders slip into harbours. York becomes a trading hub, its markets bustling with silk from Byzantium, furs from the north, and slaves from every shore. To the south, Mercia tries to hold the line. Its king, Burhs, rallies what armies he can. He calls for help from Wessex, for all of England's fate now depends on whether these two kingdoms can stand together. For a moment, they do. The armies of Mercia and Wessex march north, banners snapping in the cold wind. They surround the Viking army in the town of Nottingham, ready to strike. But the Danes do not meet them in the open. They remain inside the walls, laughing behind their defences. Winter comes, and the English have to return home to their fields. When they leave, the Danes leave two richer, stronger, their coffers full of the silver that bought their retreat. The following year, the pattern repeats. The Vikings take what they want, then vanish before resistance can form. In 869, they descend upon East Anglia. King Edmund, a man known for his piety, refuses to pay them off. He leads his army in battle, and for a brief, shining moment, it seems he might prevail. But numbers crush courage. He is captured, tied to a tree, and shot through with arrows until his body resembles a hedgehog of iron. His head is taken, his body left for the crows. The Danes name the place of his death Hoxne. Later, the English will call him Saint Edmund, the martyred king. By the early 870s, the map of Britain has changed beyond recognition. Northumbria and East Anglia are gone. Mercia is collapsing. Viking jarls rule from York to the Wash, from the Humber to the Fens. They plough the land, build halls of timber, and mint their own coins bearing Norse names. In a single decade, centuries of Anglo-Saxon progress have been undone. And yet, in the south, Wessex endures. Its king is young, intelligent, and restless. Alfred, son of Æthelwulf, brother to the fallen King Æthelred, now wears the crown. He is not tall or broad-shouldered, not the kind of man you would pick out as a warrior. But what he lacks in physical might, he makes up for in cunning. He studies the Vikings, watches their patterns, learns how they move, and he waits. When the great army finally turns its eyes toward Wessex, it meets a land prepared. In 871, the Danes strike deep into the south, taking Reading, a small but strategic town by the Thames. Alfred gathers his men, farmers, blacksmiths, priests who have swapped the cross for the sword, and marches to meet them. The battle that follows at Ashdown is chaos and fury. The morning fog clings to the hills, muffling the sound of horns. Alfred, impatient for his brother's command, charges too soon. His men follow him up the slope into the heart of the Danish shield wall. The fight lasts for hours. The ground turns slick with blood and frost. The clang of iron on iron is deafening, but Alfred's gamble pays off. Reinforcements arrive, crashing into the Danes from the flank. When the fog lifts, the field is littered with bodies. The Viking king, Bagseg, lies among them. It is a victory. Small but vital, the first crack in the Viking wave. But victory comes at a price. In the months that follow, Alfred's brother dies, leaving him sole ruler of Wessex, and with him, the last Anglo-Saxon kingdom still standing. The Danes regroup, reinforced by new ships, new warriors, and a new leader, Guthrum, a seasoned warlord with ambitions far greater than plunder. From their strongholds in Reading and London, the Vikings push again. Alfred fights battle after battle, Basing, Merton, Wilton, each more desperate than the last. Some he wins, most he loses. His army dwindles. His fortresses fall one by one. And finally, in the dead of winter, the tide turns completely. In early 878, Guthrum launches a surprise attack on Alfred's royal estate at Chippenham. Snow blankets the fields, muffling the sound of hooves. The assault is sudden, merciless. Alfred barely escapes with his life, fleeing into the swamps of Somerset with only a handful of loyal men. The great army believes they have won. They spread across Wessex, feasting in the captured halls, boasting of their conquest. They do not know that in the misty marshlands of the west, the king they thought dead is gathering strength. In the reed-choked bogs of Athelney, Alfred hides. He builds small forts, sends out scouts, and calls his people to arms. Word spreads quietly through the villages and the woods. The king still lives. One by one, the farmers and soldiers who had fled return to his side. By spring, Wessex is ready to rise again. And this time, the fight will not be for land or silver, it will be for survival. From the edge of the marshes, you can almost see the fires of the Viking camps flickering in the distance. The sky is red, the rivers swollen with spring meltwater. Alfred stands in silence, his cloak torn, his sword rusted, but his resolve harder than iron. He knows there can be no more retreat. The next battle will decide everything, whether the English people endure or vanish into legend. The storm that began with Lindisfarne has reached its height. And now, in the heart of that storm, one man prepares to fight back. The marshes of Somerset whisper like ghosts. The air is heavy with mist, and the faint sound of oars echoes across the flooded plains. You crouch beside Alfred, the last king of the English, hidden among reeds taller than a man. Around him, a handful of loyal warriors huddle near a meagre fire, their faces pale and thin, their armour rusted with salt and rain. The once proud ruler of Wessex is now a fugitive in his own land. The Vikings have taken everything, his fortresses, his treasury, his crown, and yet, in the mud and stillness, something stirs. From the ashes of ruin, the first embers of a new England begin to glow. Across the island, the great heathen army reigns supreme. It is not a single force anymore, but a living, breathing storm, a web of alliances and rival chieftains stretching from York to Winchester. The Vikings have become kings. They farm, they rule, they demand tribute. In the north, Halfdan Ragnarsson divides Northumbria among his followers, giving them land, to till and villages to govern. In the east, Guthrum and his lieutenants hold court in the conquered towns of East Anglia, and everywhere they go, they rename the world. York becomes Jorvik, Nottingham becomes Snowtingham, and the great English rivers, once murmuring Latin prayers, now sing with Norse names. But the Danes are not united. The men who once shared ships and oaths now compete for territory and treasure. Some dream of settling and ruling, others dream of endless conquest. It is this fracture, the smallest crack, that Alfred plans to drive a sword through. He has spent months in hiding, sending messengers through the marshlands, calling his remaining thanes to arms. These men come not for wealth, but for something rarer, the hope of reclaiming their home. In the stillness of the swamps, Alfred studies his enemy. He learns their movements, their strengths, and their arrogance. The Vikings believe him broken. That, he knows, will be their undoing. By the spring of 878, Alfred has gathered a small but fierce army. Farmers, shepherds, exiled warriors, ordinary men bound by desperation. They meet at a place called Egbert's Stone, and from there they march east, their feet sinking into the wet ground, their hearts pounding with dread and defiance. Across the fields ahead lies Guthrum's army, swollen with veterans of 100 battles, their banners fluttering like storm clouds. The two forces meet near a hill called Edington. The morning air is cold and sharp. Alfred's men form a shield wall, oak and iron, braced together, shoulder to shoulder. Across the field, the Danes do the same, their laughter carrying faintly on the wind. They've faced countless kings before, and to them, this one is no different, a desperate man leading farmers into slaughter. The horns sound. The ground trembles as the shield walls collide with a crash that shakes the valley. For hours, they grind against each other, shields splintering, swords shattering, men screaming. Alfred fights among his warriors, his sword red, his voice hoarse from shouting. Slowly, impossibly, the Danish line begins to falter. Guthrum's veterans are exhausted, their ranks thinning. When their wall finally breaks, Alfred's men surge forward like a tide unleashed. By sunset, the field is theirs. Guthrum flees, his army shattered. Alfred pursues him north, surrounding the Danes at Chippenham. For 2 weeks, he besieges their fortress until Guthrum sues for peace. But this is no ordinary surrender. Alfred demands something no Viking has ever agreed to before: baptism. In a quiet ceremony at Wedmore, the Danish warlord kneels as water pours over his head. Guthrum becomes Æthelstan, godson of the King of Wessex. His men follow suit, receiving new names and new gods. To the chroniclers, it is a triumph of Christianity over paganism, a sign that God favours the English. To Alfred, it is strategy. The baptism binds Guthrum by oath. For now, the Dane will keep his. Peace. The Treaty of Wedmore divides the island. The eastern half, the Dane law, remains under Norse control, its towns governed by Danish law and custom. The west and south remain English. The border between the two is fluid, but the meaning is clear. There will be 2 Britons now, one of crosses, one of hammers. In Wessex, Alfred rebuilds. The victory at Edington has given him time, and he uses every heartbeat of it. He strengthens his army, reforms the Fyrd, the levy of free men who can be called to war. He orders the construction of Burhs fortified towns, designed to resist sudden raids. Each burh becomes a seed of stability, a place where markets grow and militias can rally. But Alfred is not only a warrior, he is a scholar and a visionary. By candlelight, he translates Latin texts into Old English so that even ordinary people can read them. He brings teachers from abroad, restores monasteries, and commissions a chronicle to record the story of his people, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. For the first time, the English begin to see themselves as one nation. Still, peace is fragile. Across the border, the Danelaw hums with restless energy. Viking jarls in East Anglia and Northumbria chafe under Guthrum's Christian piety. They see Alfred's success as an insult. Bands of warriors slip across the frontier to raid, test, provoke. Alfred answers each incursion swiftly, sending his burhs to close ranks and his ships to patrol the rivers. And all the while, new fleets are gathering far away in the fjords of Norway, in the harbours of Denmark, in the bustling Norse towns of Dublin and Waterford. News of Alfred's victory has spread across the Viking world. To some, it is a tale of humiliation, to others, a challenge. In the north, half-done settlers carve farms into the Yorkshire soil, their longhouses glowing in the evening mist. They plough, they trade, they raise families. A new generation is growing up half Norse, half English speaking both tongues, praying to both gods. They do not yet know that they are the bridge between two worlds. But among the old guard, the hardened sea kings who still live by the sword, there is a hunger that peace cannot satisfy. The sons of those who followed Ragnar Lothbrok do not wish to farm, they wish to conquer, and they whisper of a plan. A new host is forming, larger than the great heathen army, richer, more ruthless. A coalition of Vikings from Ireland, Denmark, and the Isles, gathering under black sails. Their eyes are fixed on the same place that all great storms return to Wessex. Alfred has forged an England out of the ashes, but storms, like history, have long memories. And this one isn't finished yet. The smoke of battle has long since cleared, and the fields of Edington have gone silent. Yet peace in Alfred's England is never still. It's like a thin crust over lava. Beneath the quiet surface, the island trembles. The Vikings may have retreated east behind the line of the Danelaw, but they have not forgotten, and Alfred knows it. He can feel it in the rhythm of every passing season, the waiting, the watching, the heavy breath before the next storm. You wake one cold morning in Winchester, the royal heart of Wessex. The year is 880. Outside, the streets hum with new life. The markets are busier now. The Burhs, Alfred's fortified towns, are thriving. Every wall that rises is a promise. Wessex will not fall again. Children play in the shadows of the timber towers. Blacksmiths hammer weapons as priests chant Latin psalms. Alfred walks among them quietly, often disguised as a commoner, listening, learning. He has seen what fear does to men, and he will not let it rule them again. But even as he rebuilds, Alfred is haunted by what he lost. The memory of flight, of hiding in the Somerset marshes, of near ruin, it burns in him like a coal. He dreams of a stronger England, one that cannot be broken by surprise or betrayal. To build it, he must reimagine everything. He begins with defence. The Burh system spreads across the kingdom like a network of nerves. Each town is laid out with precision, walls of earth and timber, gates facing key roads, and small garrisons of permanent soldiers. The peasants nearby know exactly where to flee if raiders come. Every burh is close enough to the next that no one is ever more than a day's march from help. Then comes the fleet. Alfred studies the ships of his enemies, the long, narrow dragonships that carried terror up every English river, and he copies them, but improves them. He makes them broader, taller, faster. His ships have higher decks, giving his sailors the advantage in battle. The chroniclers later call him the father of the English navy. For Alfred, it is not glory, it is necessity. He reorganises his army, too. No longer will every able man leave his field for months to fight. Half the force stays home to farm while the other half serves, alternating throughout the year. It's a system of rotation, simple but revolutionary. It keeps his people fed and his warriors ready. And still, Alfred finds time for something even rarer in king's thought. At night, he studies books, the kind no other English ruler has bothered with since Rome fell. He reads philosophy, law, and history. He learns Latin, translates works like Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy into his own tongue, and writes prefaces in which he speaks directly to his people. He wants them to think, to understand, to be more than pawns of fate. A kingdom is only as strong, he writes, as the wisdom of its people. In his court, he gathers scholars from across Europe. They bring with them manuscripts, knowledge, and languages long forgotten in Britain. He commissions the first Anglo-Saxon chronicle, a record of events in the common tongue, not Latin. For the first time, the English begin to see themselves as part of one story. Not just Wessex, not just Mercia or Kent, but Englerland. Meanwhile, the border with the Danelaw grows uneasy. Guthrum, now calling himself King Æthelstan after his baptism, keeps the peace for the rest of his life. But the moment he dies in 890, his successors return to the old ways. Raiding parties begin to test Alfred's defences, striking at Kent and along the Thames. Alfred's bursts hold firm, but he knows that this is only the beginning. Beyond England, the Viking world is shifting again. In Ireland, Norse sea kings rule Dublin, Limerick, and Waterford, and their fleets sail east in growing numbers. In France, the Franks are paying off raiders to keep their towns safe, and in Scandinavia itself, Powerful new rulers are rising, men who dream not of plunder, but of empire. In 892, one of those rulers, Hasstein, a veteran sea king, arrives on English shores with a massive fleet. 300 ships filled with warriors, women, and children. They come not to raid, but to conquer. They land first in Kent, building a fortress at Appledore, while another group under a chieftain named Guthrum the Younger lands further north. Alfred moves swiftly. He splits his forces, sending one army to shadow the invaders, while another guards the Burhs. His new system holds no town falls, no border breaks. Hastein's forces try to strike inland, but they are met at every turn by fortified walls and organised resistance. They burn, they plunder, but they cannot find a weakness. Then Alfred plays his most dangerous move, diplomacy. He meets with Hasstein personally, offering terms, gifts, even baptism. The Viking leader accepts, smiling over the ceremony, yet within weeks he breaks his oath, launching another series of attacks. Alfred is furious, but not surprised. He expected treachery. What matters is that he bought time. By 896, after years of failed campaigns, hunger, and attrition, Hastein's army collapses. Some of his ships are wrecked in storms, others captured or abandoned. The survivors scatter into East Anglia and Northumbria, fading into the Danelaw's shadow. When the final reports reach Winchester, Alfred is already old and ill. The years of war and strain have taken their toll. He coughs often, sometimes blood, but he smiles when he hears the news. The Burr system worked. England has survived another wave. In his final years, Alfred turns again to teaching. He writes laws that combine Christian morality with practical justice, laws about fairness in trade, the treatment of the poor, and the value of mercy. He sees kingship as a burden, not a privilege, a sacred duty to hold chaos at bay. He dies in 899, surrounded by his family, his books, and the quiet hum of the kingdom he built. He leaves behind not just land, but an idea that England can endure. But even as the candle at his bedside burns low, the story doesn't end. His son, Edward, inherits a fragile peace. His daughter, Æthelflæd, the Lady of the Mercians, will soon become one of the most formidable rulers in English history. And beyond their borders, in the Danelaw and the Isles, the old gods still whisper in the longship's sails. For in the north, new warlords are rising. The sons of those who swore peace to Alfred are gathering again, men with names that will soon make kings tremble. Their eyes are fixed on one prize only, the crown of all England. The wind moves low through the reeds, whispering across the flooded valleys of Somerset. The sound is gentle, almost peaceful, but beneath it lies the thrum of dread, the heartbeat of a hunted king. You wake in the grey light before dawn. Smoke from a dying fire curls through the air, and the taste of ash sits on your tongue. Alfred, the king who once ruled Wessex with proud certainty, sits a few paces away, staring into the fog. His cloak is torn, his hands blistered. He is no longer a ruler now, only a survivor. The year is 878, the darkest moment in the story of England. The great heathen army, led by Guthrum and his lieutenants, has crushed everything in its path. The monasteries of the west are silent. The fortified Burhs are ashes. Even Alfred's royal court at Chippenham, his final stronghold, has been overrun. He escaped only by the slimmest chance, slipping away into the night while his household burned behind him. The kingdom of Wessex, once a beacon of resistance, has vanished into the smoke. Every ally has fallen, every oath of loyalty has been broken, and so the king flees west into the marshlands, where no army dares to follow. You can almost feel the damp air pressing against your skin as Alfred and his followers make camp on a small island in the flooded plain. The landscape around them is a maze of bog and water, treacherous, shifting, full of secrets. They live like ghosts, gathering roots and fish, building crude shelters from reeds and driftwood. Sometimes they raid a nearby farm for supplies. Sometimes they're given food by peasants who still whisper his name with reverence. The stories told later by chroniclers are half fact, half miracle. One says that Alfred, hiding in a poor woman's hut, was asked to watch her loaves baking by the fire. Lost in thought, he let them burn, and when she scolded him, she didn't realize she was chastising the King of England. He laughed and said nothing. Another tale tells of Alfred standing on the banks of the Marshes, praying for deliverance, promising God that if England were saved, He would rebuild it stronger than before. But this is no place of legend to him. It is cold, hunger, humiliation. The weight of his failure presses on him like a stone. Each night, the wind carries the distant sound of Viking horns from the east. He knows that Guthrum believes him dead, and for now, that mistake is his greatest weapon. From this fragile refuge, Alfred begins to rebuild his strength. He sends secret messengers across the countryside, calling to those who still live free of the Danes' rule. Old friends and loyal Vegnes answer, men like Odda of Devon and Æthelflæd of Somerset. Word spreads quietly through villages, monasteries, and forests. The king lives. The hope that follows is small, but powerful. It moves through the land like a spark in dry grass. While Alfred plans his return, Guthrum grows careless. The Danish warlord has made his home in the captured Burhs, believing the conquest complete. His men feast, take wives, and drink through the winter nights, certain that Wessex is gone. They call Alfred the Ghost King, a man who ran from his crown. Then, one day in early spring, the illusion breaks. From the west, scouts bring Guthrum alarming news. Small bands of English warriors are striking at outposts, swift, organised, disciplined. Their attacks seem random at first, a raided supply line here, a burned watchtower there. But when Guthrum spreads out his forces to crush them, they vanish back into the marshes. It's not chaos, it's strategy. By April, Alfred's army has grown into a force to be reckoned with. Farmers, hunters, and soldiers come streaming out of hiding to join him. At Egbert's Stone, the last free men of Wessex gather beneath his banner. They have no uniforms, no grand armour, only faith and fury. Yet when Alfred rides before them, his presence changes everything. He looks nothing like the terrified fugitive who hid among the reeds. The weeks of hardship have hardened him. His beard is streaked with grey, his eyes sharp as steel. His voice carries across the field. We fight not for gold or glory, but for England itself. If we fall, there will be no more kings, no more faith, no more home. We will be slaves to foreign gods. The men cheer, the sound rolling across the hills like thunder. Alfred knows what must come next. Guthrum's army waits near Chippenham, encamped on the high ground. The Danes outnumber the English, but they are scattered, unprepared for a sudden assault. Alfred leads his army through the night, marching in silence beneath the cold moon. At dawn, the two sides meet near a place called Edington. The battle begins with the roar of horns. Alfred's men form their shield wall, their round shields locking together like the scales of a dragon. The Danes rush forward, their own wall slamming into his. The sound is deafening, wood splintering, iron screaming, men shouting, in every tongue. The two armies grind against each other, each side refusing to yield. Hours pass. The sun climbs higher. The Danes begin to tire. Alfred sees the moment when their rhythm falters. He shouts a command, and his men push forward with renewed fury. The Viking line wavers, then buckles. The hill that began red with dawn ends red with blood. Guthrum's army breaks and flees. For the first time in years, the Vikings run. Alfred pursues them to their fortress at Chippenham and lays siege for 2 weeks. The Danes, trapped and starving, finally send envoys under a white flag. Guthrum himself steps forward, stripped of armour, his face hollow with defeat. He asks for peace. Alfred gives it, but on his terms. The warrior who burned his churches and slaughtered his kin must kneel in the waters of baptism. Guthrum agrees. Days later, he stands before the altar, water dripping from his hair as he takes the name Athelstan. Alfred is his godfather. The treaty that follows divides the island. The Danelaw remains in the east, the English kingdoms in the west. It is not perfect peace, but it is survival, and from survival, a nation will grow. In the months that follow, Alfred rebuilds his shattered realm. He strengthens his burhs, reorganises his armies, and sends word through every town that England still lives. But peace is never still. Far across the sea, in the harbours of Denmark and the longship docks of Dublin, new whispers begin. The sons of warriors slain at Edington speak of revenge. They tell tales of the English king who baptised their kin and broke their pride. They swear that one day they will return to wash the insult in blood. The Marshes of Somerset have given Alfred his crown back. But beyond the waves, the next storm is already gathering. The scent of spring rain still lingers on the air, heavy with the memory of blood and smoke. The fields of Edington lie quiet now, covered in new grass. Somewhere, beneath that soft earth, rest the bones of Guthrum's fallen army, the last, scattered fragments of the great heathen army that once seemed unstoppable. And yet, as peace settles over Wessex, Alfred the Great does not celebrate. He does not rest. He understands something that his enemies do not, that victory is only the beginning of survival. In the months that follow his triumph, the fragile peace between Saxon and Dane is sealed with words instead of swords. The Treaty of Wedmore carves a line across England, dividing it into two realms. To the east lies the Danelaw lands, now ruled by Guthrum, newly baptized as Æthelstan, and his Norse lords. To the west stands Alfred's England, a kingdom battered but breathing. It's a piece of convenience, not trust. Both sides know that if one falters, the other will seize the advantage. For Alfred, the years after Edington become a race against time. He knows the Vikings will return eventually, whether from across the North Sea or from within their own restless settlements. The treaty has bought him years, not safety. So, he builds. He begins with the Burhs, those great fortified towns that will become the backbone of his defence. Some are new, raised from the mud by labourers and soldiers. Others rise on the bones of old Roman cities, their walls repaired and strengthened. Each one is a symbol of permanence in a land too long ruled by impermanence. Inside their walls, people trade, learn, and live under the steady rhythm of the church bell instead of the battle horn. To govern this growing network, Alfred issues his Burghal Hidage, a system that assigns every free man a duty, every acre a purpose. Each burh must have a certain number of men ready to defend it, based on the size of its surrounding lands. For the first time, England becomes a web of mutual protection, a living body with Alfred as its mind. He doesn't stop there. He reforms the law, too. The new Doom Book, his code of justice, combines the ancient customs of the Saxons with Christian morality. Theft, assault, feuds, and oaths are all addressed in its pages. But more than punishment, it teaches restraint. Alfred believes that justice, not vengeance, is the mark of civilization. He builds schools and invites scholars from abroad to teach his people to read and write. For without learning, he says, we are like blind men in the dark. Under his patronage, English becomes a written language of record and faith, not just of speech. He translates Latin texts, Gregory's Pastoral Care, Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, and others into the tongue of his people, ensuring that knowledge will no longer be the privilege of a few priests, but the right of every Englishman. But while Alfred teaches his people how to read, he also teaches them how to fight. His army, once a patchwork of farmers summoned by need, is now a professional, organised force. His new system ensures that no army can ever again vanish home at harvest time, leaving the realm undefended. A rotating structure of service keeps one half of the men in the field, while the other half tends the land. The next time an invader lands, he will not face a mob of frightened peasants, he will face England itself. The years pass, and Alfred's vision begins to take shape. The burhs grow into bustling towns, the old roads between them hum with trade, markets flourish. Foreign merchants arrive from as far as Flanders and the Frankish coast. The kingdom begins to heal, and with it, a new kind of pride is born. Yet peace, like the sea, never stays calm for long. In 892, the horizon darkens once more. From the coasts of northern France comes news of a new fleet larger than any before. 300 longships filled with hardened warriors, women, children, livestock, and supplies. This is no raiding party, it is an exodus. The Danes have been driven out of Francia by the armies of the Carolingians, and now they look again to England, the land of opportunity and unfinished vengeance. The fleet lands in Kent, building fortresses at Appledore and Milton. At their head stands a familiar name, Hastin, a legendary sea king known across Europe for his cunning and brutality. Alfred moves swiftly. He summons his army, calling men from every burh. His new network of defences springs into action, like muscle responding to a wound. Armies gather faster than ever before, coordinated through a system of signals and riders. For weeks, skirmishes rage across southern England. Alfred's forces harry the invaders, cutting their supply lines, surrounding their strongholds. Hastin, ever the strategist, attempts to outwit him. He sends envoys under the banner of truce, swearing peace in exchange for land and baptism. Alfred, perhaps hoping to avoid unnecessary slaughter, agrees. The ceremony is held, the vows made. But as always, Viking oaths are made to be broken. Within days, Hastin strikes again, raiding deeper into Wessex, only to find that this time the English are ready. His men clash with Alfred's army near Farnham and are driven back in disarray. The Burhs hold, the roads are guarded, and the rivers, once Viking highways, are now patrolled by Alfred's fleet. The Sea Kings find themselves trapped in the very land they sought to conquer. One by one, their fortresses fall. By 896, the great invasion fleet lies shattered. Some ships are burned, others abandoned. Hastin himself vanishes into the Danelaw, his dreams of empire drowned in the marshes of England. When the last of the Viking sails disappear over the horizon, Alfred stands on the shore, older now, worn thin by years of war and worry. The chroniclers will later call him the Great, but in this moment he is simply a man who has done the impossible. He has turned the tide. Yet even as he watches the sea calm again, he knows peace will not outlast him. The Danelaw still breathes in the north and east, ruled by Danish jarls who swear loyalty when convenient and plunder when they can. His sons and daughters will inherit a divided island, half Christian, half pagan, half Saxon, half Norse. Alfred dies in 899, leaving behind a fragile miracle, a united southern England, strong enough to dream of wholeness. But the dream will need new hands to hold it. His son Edward the Elder will inherit his crown, and his daughter Æthelflæd will inherit his fire. Together, they will wage a war not of survival, but of reclamation. The Danelaw still waits, vast and rich, a foreign world within their homeland. And in its heart, the next storm is already stirring. The Danelaw still breathes in the north and east, ruled by Danish jarls who swear loyalty when convenient and plunder when they can. His sons and daughters will inherit a divided island, half Christian, half pagan, half Saxon, half Norse. Alfred dies in 899, leaving behind a fragile miracle, a united southern England, strong enough to dream of wholeness. But the dream will need new hands to hold it. His son Edward the Elder will inherit his crown, and his daughter Alfred will inherit his fire. Together they will wage a war not of survival, but of reclamation. The Danelaw still waits, vast and rich, a foreign world within their homeland. And behind the walls of York, new kings are rising, descendants of the men Alfred defeated, men who still carry the blood of Ragnar Lothbrok and the fire of vengeance in their veins. The rain falls soft and steady over Winchester, tapping against the tiled roofs of a city reborn. Smoke rises from forges, bells toll in the abbey, and in the market square, the people of Wessex trade, laugh, and live without the sound of war drums. This is Alfred's legacy, a kingdom fortified not just by walls and weapons, but by faith, by discipline, and by something far rarer in these dark centuries, vision. But Alfred is gone now, laid to rest beneath the stones of the old minster in 899. His kingdom passes into the hands of his eldest son, Edward, called the Elder, and with him, the dream of a united England begins to take its first true shape. When Edward ascends the throne, he inherits more than his father's crown. He inherits a nation divided by blood and language, a fragile balance between Saxon and Dane. To the south and west, the Burhs of Wessex stand strong, humming with trade and guarded by disciplined men. But to the north and east, the Danelaw still stretches, wide. Its towns ruled by jarls who follow the laws of Odin and Frey rather than Christ. Between these two worlds lies Mercia, the heartland of England, ruled not by a king, but by a woman whose name will one day be spoken in awe, Æthelflæd, the Lady of the Mercians. Edward and Æthelflæd are brother and sister, bound by blood and ambition. While Edward wears the crown, Æthelflæd wears command. She is the daughter of Alfred and the wife of Ethelred, Lord of Mercia, but in truth she rules alone. Her husband's health has failed, her strength has not. From her fortress at Tamworth, she governs a realm that has seen both Roman glory and Saxon ruin. Her people adore her, for she is not a figurehead. She rides to battle, oversees fortifications, and negotiates with kings. Together, Edward and Æthelflæd begin a campaign unlike any England has seen before. Not a desperate war for survival, as Alfred once fought, but a deliberate, methodical reconquest. They will not merely defend, they will reclaim. The plan is simple and brilliant. Every few months, a new burh rises along the frontier, a ring of timber and stone encircling a bustling market and a permanent garrison. These fortresses are not just military posts, they are seeds of civilization planted deep into the contested soil of the Danelaw. As they grow, they draw trade and settlers, spreading English lore and language into the frontier like creeping roots. Æthelflæd begins in the west. She rebuilds Chester, the old Roman fortress that guards the border of Wales. Its thick walls and river access make it a perfect base for her campaigns. Then she moves east, fortifying Worcester and Warwick. Each time the Danes test her defences, they find the Lady of the Mercians waiting calm, prepared, unyielding. Edward does the same in the south. He strengthens the Thames Valley, builds Burhs at Hertford and Witham, and expands the great fortress of Winchester. Together, they weave a chain of protection that links Wessex and Mercia like a clasped hand. The Viking jarls in the Danelaw watch this growing network with unease. Their old strategy, fast raids and surprise attacks no longer works. The English now have walls, signal fires, and garrisons ready to respond in days, not weeks. In 910, a great Viking army from Northumbria decides to crush Mercia once and for all. They march south in a frenzy of vengeance, plundering monasteries and burning villages as they go. But this time, they are the ones caught unprepared. At Tetton Hall, near the River Severn, the combined armies of Wessex and Mercia descend upon them. The slaughter is absolute. The Norse commanders are cut down. Their army is annihilated. It is the greatest victory since Edington, and the message is clear. The age of Viking conquest is over. The age of English reconquest has begun. Æthelflæd wastes no time. In the years that follow, she becomes a living legend. She leads her army north and east, striking deep into the Danelaw. Leicester falls, Derby follows. She builds new fortresses at Runcorn and Bridgenorth, pushing the frontier further every season. Chroniclers begin calling her Mercna Hlefdij, the Lady of the Mercians, but her soldiers call her something simpler, our Queen. Even the Welsh princes across the western border send her tribute, impressed by her power. In the north, the kings of York, descendants of the great heathen army, watch her rise with growing alarm. Their spies whisper that the Lady of Mercia intends to drive the Danes from England entirely. They are not wrong. By 917, the campaign has reached its climax. Edward strikes from the south, while Æthelflæd moves from the west. The armies meet near Bedford, where the Danes make their final stand. The siege lasts for weeks. Arrows darken the sky, catapults hurl stones into the enemy walls, and the thunder of rams shakes the gates. When the fortress finally falls, the Danelaw begins to unravel. Town after town submits to English rule. Then, suddenly, tragedy strikes. Æthelflæd falls ill during the campaign. She lives long enough to see Leicester surrender peacefully, the city's Danish leaders pledging loyalty to her in person. But before she can see the final victory, her strength fades. She dies in 918, her body carried back to Gloucester, where her people bury her beside her husband. As the earth closes over her grave, the soldiers of Mercia weep. The woman who fought like a king and ruled like a saint is gone. Edward wastes no time mourning. He moves swiftly to secure what his sister began. Mercia, now leaderless, is absorbed into Wessex. For the first time in history, the heart of England beats as one. But unity is fragile. The Danelaw still holds the north, and in its capital, York, the Norse kings plot. They are no longer mere raiders or wanderers, they have grown rich, their cities thriving with trade from Ireland, Francia, and even Byzantium. They see themselves as rightful rulers of the north, and they will not kneel to any Saxon king. Edward knows this. So, as he walks the streets of Winchester, hearing the clamour of merchants and the ring of hammers against anvils, he looks north and sees not peace, but unfinished work. The war that Alfred began to survive must now be fought to unite. Beyond the Humber River, a new generation of Vikings is gathering under one banner, led by kings who carry both Norse ferocity and English cunning in their blood. Among them is a young warlord, descended from Ragnar's line, born in Dublin, hardened in York, whose ambition is whispered even among his enemies. His name is Olaf, and before long, his sails will darken the horizon once more. Morning mist curls above the River Severn as the banners of Mercia ripple in the breeze. Beneath them rides a woman in armour, not a queen by title, but by command. Æthelflæd, daughter of Alfred the Great, sister of Edward the Elder, and lady of the Mercians, surveys the land her father once saved and her brother now seeks to unite. She is not young, not frail, and never underestimated. Every scar on her armour tells the story of survival, of patience, of vengeance made lawful. The year is 910, and the air hums with a different kind of war. Gone are the desperate struggles for survival that defined her father's time. This is a campaign of reclamation, an organised, relentless push to drive the Danes from the heart of England. The great battles of Wessex have bought them time, and Æthelflæd intends to use it with precision. Mercia stands at the front of that fight, the hinge between the south and the north. To the west lies Wales, whose princes pay tribute to her in respect and fear. To the east, across the rivers and hills, lies the Danelaw half the island, still under Norse rule. For more than 40 years, the Danes have ruled the fertile lands of the Midlands and the old Roman cities that dot them. Their grip is firm, their culture embedded. Children speak Old Norse in the marketplaces, their churches are still halls of Odin and Thor, and their coins bear the names of Viking kings. But Æthelflæd is not intimidated. Her strategy is not brute force, it's endurance. She knows that kingdoms are not conquered overnight. They are starved, surrounded, suffocated until they collapse under their own weight. She begins by building. The Burhs fortified towns her father designed become her weapon of choice. Chester, Bridgenorth, Tamworth, Stafford, Warwick, and Runcorn all rebuilt or newly fortified under her command. Each one a thorn in the Danelaw's side, a fortress where trade can flourish and armies can rally. With each wall raised, the border of English power creeps northward. She doesn't fight from afar. The lady of the Mercians rides with her soldiers, sharing their food, their hardships, and sometimes even their wounds. Chroniclers write that she led from the front, an image almost unthinkable in her age. When the Welsh kings hesitate to send aid, she sends riders straight into their lands, not with pleas, but with orders. They obey. Her leadership transforms Mercia. The region that once wavered between submission and rebellion becomes a disciplined, united realm. Farmers sow fields beneath the protection of her Burhs. Traders cross the rivers again without fear of Norse ambush. The people begin to whisper her name in reverence. Meanwhile, her brother Edward in Wessex wages his own campaigns, mirroring her tactics. The siblings move like two sides of the same blade, cutting off Viking supply lines, isolating their strongholds, and reclaiming town after town. By 910, their cooperation brings a stunning victory at Tettenhall. The Viking armies of Northumbria had crossed the border in a bold attempt to reclaim Mercian territory. They are met not by scattered Saxon farmers, but by an organised coalition of Wessex and Mercia. The battle is a slaughter. The Norse kings of York fall in the field, their banners trampled into the mud. Tettenhall marks the end of the Viking high tide in England. From that day forward, the Danelaw begins to shrink. Æthelflæd senses the shift. Her scouts bring her news of unrest in the north of rival Jarls fighting over what remains of their domains, of Danish lords unable to maintain control. It's the opportunity she's been waiting for. She pushes deeper into the Midlands, reclaiming towns one by one. In 917, Derby falls after a brutal siege. The fight is fierce, close, and personal. Many of her household warriors die in the assault. Yet when the city surrenders, Æthelflæd rides through its gates not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. She orders no reprisals, no slaughter. Her policy is clear. The Danes who stay in peace will live in peace. She wins not only with the sword, but with mercy. Within a year, she takes Leicester without bloodshed. Towns that once flew the Raven banner now send her tribute willingly. The Danelaw is collapsing in on itself, weakened by infighting and by her relentless advance. But her greatest challenge waits still ahead. York, the Viking capital of England, the heart of Norse power. For half a century, it has been the seat of Scandinavian kings, rich from trade and brutal in defence. To take York would be to end the Danelaw itself, to forge the foundation of a truly united England. In 918, as she plans her northern campaign, an unexpected message arrives. The people of York, tired of Danish quarrels and fearing new invasions from Ireland, offer to submit to her rule. No army. No siege. They will swear loyalty to the Lady of the Mercians. It is the moment her entire life has been building toward. But fate, cruel and quiet, moves faster than she can. Before she can march north to claim the city, Æthelflæd falls ill. The fever grips her quickly, leaving her too weak to rise. Her soldiers wait, praying for her recovery. Her brother sends messengers, urging her to rest. She does not listen. She dictates letters, commands, strategies. Even on her deathbed, she governs. On June 12, 918, Æthelflæd dies in Gloucester, the city she had chosen as her seat of power. She is buried beside her husband beneath the great minster she founded. As the news spreads through Mercia, the people mourn not just a ruler, but the soul of their kingdom. Her daughter, Ælfwine, briefly inherits her title, but Edward moves swiftly to bring Mercia under his direct rule. The lady's realm becomes part of Wessex. The old division between the south and the Midlands is gone. For the first time, most of England, Wessex, Mercia, and East Anglia is united under one crown. Still, one great shadow remains. Northumbria, ruled from York, remains independent. Its kings swear no oaths to Edward. Its people still follow Danish law, still pray to the old gods, still sing the sagas of Ragnar and Ivar by their hearths. The English hold the land to the south, the Norse hold the land of the north. And somewhere beyond the Humber River, in the smoke-filled halls of York, a new voice rises among them. A young warlord, clever and ambitious, has begun to speak of reclaiming what his ancestors lost. He tells the Jarls that the English think the north is tamed, but it is only sleeping. His name is Sitrick, and he will soon wear the crown of Jorvik. But another name is already rising in the south, a boy who will become the first true king of all England. Edward's son, Alfred's grandson, Athelstan. And when these two worlds meet Christian and pagan, Saxon and Norse, the island will shake again. The candle burns low in the royal chamber at Winchester. Outside, rain drums softly on the eaves. The king of the English, Edward the Elder, sits alone, hunched over a map of his father's realm. On parchment, the borders seem clean and neat, lines dividing Wessex from Mercia, Mercia from the Danelaw. But Edward knows the truth. Those lines are drawn not in ink, but in blood. And every drop spilled so far has only bought him time, not peace. When his sister Æthelflæd dies in 918, Edward inherits more than her land, he inherits her unfinished dream. The Danelaw still looms to the north, the Norse Jarls of York still rule by the hammer instead of the cross, and across the sea, new fleets rise like storm clouds on the horizon. England, as his father once imagined it, exists only as an idea fragile, shimmering, unfinished. Edward is not a man of grand gestures or poetry. He is a builder, a grinder, a king who rules by detail and patience. The chroniclers do not call him great, but they call him the Elder, and in the hard years ahead, that steadiness becomes his greatest weapon. He begins where his sister left off. Mercia is now fully absorbed into his realm, and from the walls of Chester to the banks of the Thames, his authority stretches unbroken. He fortifies the old Roman roads that connect his towns and expands the Burh system deeper into the reclaimed Danelaw. For every fortress he builds, a market springs up beside it. For every garrison, a monastery. Trade returns, law returns. And slowly, almost invisibly, English life begins to spread northward like roots through soil that once belonged to the Danes. In 920, Edward's army pushes into Northumbria's borderlands. His men march up the old Roman road to Manchester, establishing garrisons at Bakewell and Nottingham. The Danes, weakened by civil strife and tired of endless war, make a surprising decision: they sue for peace. At Bakewell, in a small stone church on a windswept hill, the leaders of the north gather before Edward. The chroniclers record the moment in a single line, and then the kings of the north, of the Scots, and of the Britons chose Edward as father and lord. For the first time, the kings of Britain, those of Strathclyde, Scotland, and even Northumbria acknowledge a single overlord. The idea of one English realm, of one island bound under one rule, becomes real. Edward's rule, though hard and absolute, brings stability. He establishes coinage bearing his name across both Saxon and Danish lands. His law courts blend the customs of both peoples, allowing the Norse to keep their trade rights and their local assemblies, the thing, as long as they swear loyalty to him. It is not conquest by fire, but by assimilation. And it works. But while Edward forges a realm, the north remains a restless frontier. York, or Jorvik, is still ruled by the descendants of Ivar and Ragnar warrior kings who swear loyalty only to profit. They have no patience for Edward's Christian laws or his quiet order. In 924, Edward marches north again, intent on subduing them once and for all. But age, that most patient of enemies, has finally caught him. The campaign takes its toll. He grows ill while quelling a rebellion near Chester. On July 17, 924, Edward the Elder dies, still in his armour, surrounded by his generals. He is buried beside Alfred at Winchester, their bones laid together as if father and son might whisper to one another in death what they could never finish in life. His son, Athelstan, succeeds him. Athelstan is not like his father. He has his grandfather Alfred's fire, but also something colder, an intellect sharpened by years of exile and education. Raised for a time in Mercia under his aunt Æthelflæd's care, he has grown up among warriors, scholars, and priests. He is fluent in Latin, skilled in diplomacy, and trained in every art of war. When he becomes king, he inherits not just a crown, but a mission, to turn his family's dream into reality. The Danes of York test him immediately. Sihtric, the Norse king of Jorvik, seeks both defiance and legitimacy. He meets Athelstan at Tamworth, and rather than fight, the two men make peace through marriage. Sihtric takes Athelstan's sister as his wife. It is a fragile alliance, but it buys the young king time. For a few years, the north is quiet. Athelstan uses the reprieve to strengthen his hold elsewhere. He reforms the coinage, standardizing its weight and purity across his realm. He calls councils of nobles and clergy, issuing decrees that regulate everything from theft to trade to the wearing of weapons in towns. His laws are stern, his punishments harsher still. But through them, he forges something new, a sense that all who live under his rule, Saxon or Dane, share a single identity. Then, in 927, Sihtric dies. The fragile peace shatters. The throne of York is claimed by Sihtric's kinsmen, Norsemen who refuse to bend the knee to a pleasing Saxon. Athelstan acts without hesitation. He gathers his armies from every corner of England, Wessex, Mercia, East Anglia, and marches north. The speed of his campaign catches the Danes off guard. York falls within weeks. When he rides into the city, the people do not resist. They kneel. The raven banners are torn down, replaced by the golden cross of Wessex. For the first time in history, every English kingdom lies under one ruler. Athelstan is crowned at Kingston upon Thames as Rex Totius Britanniae, King of all Britain. His court becomes a magnet for scholars, poets, and foreign dignitaries. Envoys from France, Germany, and even distant Byzantium come to Winchester to pay respects to this new power rising in the west. He corresponds with kings, exchanges relics with saints, and sponsors monasteries across the land. Yet beneath the grandeur, trouble stirs. The kings of Scotland and Strathclyde resent their oaths of loyalty. Across the sea in Ireland, Norse lords dream of retaking York, and among Athelstan's own advisers, there are whispers that the king's ambitions are too vast, his reach too wide. He ignores them. He is his grandfather's grandson. He will not stop until the island itself bows before the crown of England. And so, as the harvest of 937 approaches, dark tidings reach Winchester. A coalition has formed. The kings of Scotland, Strathclyde, and Dublin have united under a single banner, their warriors gathering in the north. Their goal is simple: to crush Athelstan's power and drive the English back south of the Humber forever. The greatest battle the island has ever seen is coming, and when it breaks, the fate of Britain will be decided on one blood-soaked field, Brunanburh. The sun rises red over the northern hills. It stains the clouds like spilled blood, and the air carries the faint metallic taste of what's coming. You stand in the camp of King Athelstan, the grandson of Alfred the Great, the son of Edward the Elder, and the first man to wear the crown of a truly united England. Around him, the army stirs. Men from every corner of the realm, Wessex, Mercia, Kent, East Anglia, Englishmen who a generation ago would have called each other enemies. Now they fight beneath one banner, the gold and blue cross of Athelstan. It's the year 937, and the king's dream stands on the edge of ruin. For almost a decade, Athelstan's England has held together through a fragile balance of strength and diplomacy. After seizing York from the Danes in 927, He became overlord of the entire island. The kings of Wales and Scotland swore fealty. The Norse rulers of Ireland sent gifts to his court. Even the mighty Emperor Otto of the Holy Roman Empire called him brother. His reputation stretched from the fjords to the Alps, a warrior, scholar, and lawgiver. But power breeds fear. Constantine II of Scotland, Olaf Guthfrithson of Dublin, and Owen of Strathclyde, three kings with little in common except their hatred of English domination, have formed an alliance to break him. Together, they summon every resource at their command. Fleets from Ireland, horsemen from Alba, spearmen from the Welsh marches. From Dublin's harbours to the Highland glens, men are promised gold, plunder, and glory. They march south toward England like a tide of steel. Athelstan receives word of their advance while holding court at Winchester. He does not flinch. He knows the storm is coming, and he intends to meet it head-on. If they seek my crown, he tells his captains, they will find it on the field, not in a hall. He gathers his army and rides north. The march takes weeks. Rain lashes their faces, mud clings to their boots, but morale never breaks. The king rides among them, not above them, sharing their bread and sleeping in the open air. He is no distant monarch, he is a general forged in war. By early autumn, the two great armies meet near a place called Brunanburh, its exact location lost to time, swallowed by the centuries, but somewhere between the Humber and the Mersey. Chroniclers will later call it the Great Battle, the day England was born in blood. On the eve of battle, Athelstan stands before his men. His golden cloak, embroidered with the cross of Wessex, flutters in the wind. Tomorrow, he says, we fight not for land, but for who we are. The Northmen and the Scots wish to tear this island apart again, to unmake what my fathers built. But we are one people now, Saxon and Dane, Christian and convert. England will not die while we still draw breath. The men shout their oaths, banging swords against shields, their voices rolling across the hills like thunder. At dawn, the armies collide. The enemy's lines stretch wide, Olaf's Norsemen in the centre, Constantine's Scots on one flank, and the Britons of Strathclyde on the other. The clash is a sound beyond imagining, iron against iron, the screams of men and horses, the thud of shields. The ground shakes. Athelstan's army holds firm. His infantry, hardened veterans of the Burh Wars, lock shields into a wall that will not break. His household troops, men who fought beside him for years, press forward through the chaos, cutting down the invaders one by one. The English archers loose volley after volley until the sky turns dark with arrows. For hours, the battle sways. The enemy drives deep into the English lines, but every time they gain ground, Athelstan rallies his men and pushes them back. His brother Edmund, barely 18, fights at his side, earning scars that will mark him for life. The Norse charge again and again, their war cries echoing across the field, but the English hold. Then, in the afternoon heat, Athelstan sees his moment. The Scots on the flank begin to waver. Their ranks are thin, their coordination breaking. The king orders his mounted Degners, his elite cavalry, to strike. They thunder forward in a wedge, lances gleaming. The impact is devastating. The Scottish flank collapses, the Norse centre exposed. Athelstan gives the signal, and his entire line surges forward in one massive push. The enemy routs. The field becomes a slaughter. Olaf's war banner, the black raven of Ragnar's line, falls to the ground. Constantine's son is cut down, and Olaf himself barely escapes to his ships, wounded and beaten. The coalition that threatened to unmake England is shattered. As the sun sets over Brunanburh, the field is strewn with bodies. 5 kings and 7 earls lie dead. Chroniclers will later write that never before in this island was there such slaughter since the Saxons came. The English stand victorious, bloodied but unbroken. Athelstan rides among the dead as the torches are lit. The cries of the wounded mix with the soft murmur of prayers. His men begin to chant his name. Lo and reverent Athelstan Rex Totius Britanniae, the first king of all Britain. In the months that follow, Athelstan's triumph at Brunanburh echoes across Europe. He sends gifts to monasteries, coins are minted with his image, and his name becomes legend. Even in the courts of foreign kings, the battle is spoken of with awe. But peace never lasts long on this island. Athelstan's later years are marked by growing unease. The unity he forged depends entirely on his strength, and he knows it. The Norse in York still dream of independence. The Scots lick their wounds and plot revenge. Even among his own nobles, envy festers. They whisper that the king's reach is too wide, his power too absolute. In 939, after a reign of 16 years, Athelstan dies suddenly at Gloucester. He is only in his 40s. The realm he leaves behind is vast and magnificent but fragile. His body is carried to Malmesbury Abbey, the monastery he loved most, where he is buried beneath a simple stone that reads, Athelstan, King of all Britain. But the ink of history is still wet. Even before his grave cools, the north rises again. Olaf Guthfrithson, the son of Athelstan's old enemy, returns from Ireland at the head of a new fleet. York welcomes him. The Danelaw breathes once more. The hard-won peace begins to fracture. Athelstan's brother Edmund takes the throne, young and untested. The crown weighs heavy, and the old war banners of the north are already being unfurled. The dream of a united England has been realised, but whether it can survive without the man who built it is another matter entirely. And as the sails of a new Viking fleet catch the wind off the Irish Sea, the answer is about to be written in fire once again. The morning mist hangs low over the Humber, thick and cold as breath on steel. The waters are grey, endless, and then, out of the fog, the shapes appear. Dozens of ships, their curved prows carved into dragons and ravens, slicing through the tide. On their decks, warriors stand shoulder to shoulder, cloaked in mail and furs, their shields painted in the deep, dark hues of night. At their head stands a man whose eyes burn like the sea in stormlight, Olaf Guthfrithson, the son of Dublin, the heir of Ragnar's fury, and the king who has come to reclaim what his ancestors lost. The year is 939, and England, so recently unified under Athelstan's rule, is about to fracture again. Athelstan's death sent tremors through the land like a felled oak hitting the forest floor. He had been the glue that bound the kingdom together, the mind that kept the rivalries in check. When he died, there was grief but also opportunity. The Norse Jarls of York, the Scots in their highlands, the Welsh, princes, even discontented lords within Wessex, they all saw the same thing. The crown was vulnerable again. His half-brother Edmund takes the throne. He is young, barely 18, and though he has fought bravely at Brunanburh, he is still a prince made king before his time. The ink is barely dry on Athelstan's epitaph when Olaf lands in Northumbria. The city of York, weary of southern rule, opens its gates without resistance. The raven banner flies once more over its walls. The Danelaw lives again. To the English in the south, it feels like the past has returned from the grave. The merchants of Lincoln, the farmers of the Trent Valley, the abbots of Peterborough, they all remember the old days of fear, when dragonships came with the tide and gold could buy safety only for a season. Now those days have come again. Edmund cannot afford to wait. He rallies his forces from Wessex and Mercia, gathering the thanes and fyrdsmen who once fought for Athelstan. But his kingdom is stretched thin. Many of his father's and grandfather's commanders are gone, replaced by young men untested in war. Olaf's forces move fast. By winter, he controls York, the Humber coast, and much of the Midlands. The old border of the Danelaw is redrawn in blood. He doesn't just raid, he governs. Coins bearing his name appear in York's markets. Norse law and custom return. The merchants of the Irish Sea flock to his ports, and once again the trade routes of the north are ruled by men who speak the tongue of Odin. When spring comes, Edmund strikes. The armies meet first at Leicester, then at Tamworth. It is not a single decisive battle, but a series of brutal engagements, towns besieged, bridges burned, fords fought over again and again. The chronicles say that the land groaned under iron. At Tamworth, the fighting is so close that the river runs red for miles downstream, and yet neither side wins. Olaf holds the north, Edmund holds the south. Both men are weary, both. Kingdoms are exhausted. So, in 941, they meet to make peace. The terms are simple. The line of the Danelaw is restored. Olaf will rule York and the lands north of the Humber. Edmund will rule all south of it. Each king swears to respect the other's borders, but peace with Vikings has always been a truce with wolves. Only 2 years later, Olaf dies suddenly, some say of fever, others whisper of poison. His cousin, Olaf Kvaran, takes the throne of York, but he is weaker, less cunning, and beset by rivals. The Norse Jarls bicker and feud. Their unity dies with their king. Edmund seizes his chance. In 944, he marches north once more, not as a boy king, but as a hardened commander. His armies sweep across the old Danelaw, breaking the Norse resistance piece by piece. York falls again this time, not through diplomacy, but by fire and sword. The Raven banner is torn down for the last time. When Edmund rides into the city, he orders no massacre. Instead, he spares those who submit, replacing Danish lords with English governors. The victory is more than territorial, it is psychological. The north, the land that had resisted Wessex for generations, now bows to it. For the first time since the dawn of the Viking Age, England is wholly English again. But Edmund's triumph is short-lived. In 946, during a feast at Puckelchurch, the young king is murdered. The story is as tragic as it is strange. While intervening in a brawl between his guards and an outlaw named Leofa, Edmund is stabbed to death before anyone can stop it. The man who united the kingdom his brother had built falls not in battle, but at a table. His brother Edred inherits the throne. Like his forefathers, he is immediately forced to confront the north. The death of a king is blood in the water, and the Norse of York rise again, inviting a new claimant, Eric Haraldsson, better known by the name that echoes through the sagas, Eric Bloodaxe. Eric is everything the stories claim: ruthless, proud, unpredictable. He rules by the axe, not the law. Under his hand, York becomes a city of warriors, a place where law and life hang by the edge of a blade. He drives out rivals, crushes dissent, and carves his name into the bones of the north. For nearly a decade, England teeters on the edge of chaos once more. The south follows Eadred, the north follows Eric, and the dream of a single kingdom seems to die with every passing winter. But Eadred is patient. He does not seek glory, he seeks permanence. He cuts off York's trade routes, strangles its allies, and slowly bleeds its wealth. When Eric raids into Mercia, Edred burns the north in retribution, destroying its harvests and leaving its people starving. By 954, even the Norse lords of York have had enough. They turn on Eric. In the fog of the Cumbrian hills, the last Viking king of England is ambushed and killed. His body, stripped of its armour, is left among the stones, claimed by no one. His axe, they say, was still red when they found it beside him. When word reaches Winchester, Edred kneels in prayer. For the first time in nearly 2 centuries, there are no Viking kings in England, no jarls in York, no foreign banners over English towns. The long war that began on the shores of Lindisfarne in 793, 160 years of invasion, resistance, and conquest, is finally over. And yet, even as peace returns, the memory of those years runs deep. The Norsemen who stayed behind the settlers, the farmers, the craftsmen, are now part of England itself. Their blood, their language, their gods, even their names are woven into its fabric. The word law comes from their tongue, so do sky, window, knife, egg, and 100 others. The English and the Norse have become something new, a single people born from fire and faith. But history, like the sea, never stays still. The sons of the north are quiet for now, but across the Channel, in Normandy, another people of Viking descent are rising sharper, richer, more ambitious. And one day, they will look across the same waters and see England not as a friend, but as a prize. The age of the Vikings is ending. The age of kings is about to begin. The sea is calm again. For the first time in nearly 200 years, no dragon-headed ships haunt the English horizon. The long roar of the Northmen, the raids, the wars, the burning of towns and monasteries has finally gone quiet. From the ashes of invasion, a new England has emerged. One kingdom under one crown, its people united by blood, hardship, and hope. But even in peace, the winds of change are never still. The scars of the Viking Age run deep, and though the raiders are gone, their legacy is far from over. When Edred died in 955, the realm he left behind was whole but fragile. The north was pacified, yet restless. The south was rich but weary. Into this uncertain peace stepped a boy of 16, his nephew, Edgar, remembered by later generations as Edgar the Peaceful. The name is deceptive. Edgar's peace was not born from weakness but from overwhelming strength. He inherited a kingdom that had been built in blood and bound it together not through war, but through order. He ruled from Winchester, the old heart of Wessex, but his influence stretched across every shire. His court became a model of organisation. Fleets patrolled the coasts, local councils enforced the king's laws, and the church, reborn after centuries of ruin, flourished under his protection. In the north, where Viking law had once reigned, Edgar treaded carefully. He did not purge the Danes or erase their customs. He incorporated them. The Danelaw was no longer an enemy but a region of England, its people now subjects of the crown. Norse earls became English lords. The old Norse words for law, trade and governance seeped permanently into the language. Even the currency bore the mark of this new fusion. Silver pennies stamped with both Saxon and Scandinavian designs. The land prospered. The rivers ran with merchant ships instead of longships. Markets thrived in York, Lincoln, and London. Across Europe, travellers began to speak of the kingdom of the English as one of the most orderly and wealthy realms in Christendom. But Edgar knew that peace could only last if it was watched over by power. He built what his grandfather Alfred had dreamed of, a navy that could defend every shore. The chroniclers say he personally rowed a royal barge surrounded by the captains of 8 fleets, their oars beating in perfect rhythm as the people on the riverbanks watched in awe. It was both ceremony and message. England now ruled the waves that had once carried her conquerors. Under Edgar, the church too became a force of unity. He elevated great reformers like Dunstan, Archbishop of Canterbury, who reorganized monasteries and restored learning across the realm. Monks became not just keepers of the faith, but administrators, teachers, and chroniclers. From their pens flowed the stories of how England had survived the storm, the very tales that still echo through the centuries. Yet, as every age of peace eventually learns, prosperity breeds complacency. Edgar's the rule was long and calm, but when he died in 975, he left behind not stability, but rivalry. His sons, Edward and Æthelflæd, soon fell into conflict, a struggle that would undo everything their ancestors had built. Edward, known to history as Edward the Martyr, took the throne first. He was pious, young, and idealistic, but his half-brother Æthelflæd's supporters saw him as weak. 3 years into his reign, Edward was murdered under mysterious circumstances at Corfe Castle. Some said it was a political assassination, others whispered that Æthelflæd himself had ordered it. Either way, the throne passed to Æthelflæd, and England's golden peace began to crack. The new king would earn a name that still hangs over him like a curse. Æthelflæd the Unready, from the Old English unrad, meaning poorly advised. At first his reign began with promise. The kingdom was rich and vast, its fleets strong, its borders secure. But across the sea, in Denmark, a new power was rising, more organised, more ruthless, and far more ambitious than the raiders of old. In the late 982, the longships returned. At first, they came as before, small bands striking the coasts, burning towns, vanishing into the mist. But soon, the raids became larger, coordinated. The leaders were no longer petty jarls, they were kings. Swine Forkbeard of Denmark and his son, Canute, sought not silver, but sovereignty. They came not to plunder England, but to claim it. Æthelflæd's response was disastrous. Instead of fighting, he paid the invaders off with massive sums of silver, the infamous Danegeld. It worked for a time, but each payment only invited more ships. Every coastal town became a target, every abbey a treasury waiting to be emptied. The cycle of tribute and betrayal turned the once proud English crown into a purse for its enemies. In 1002, in a moment of desperation and fear, Æthelflæd ordered what would become one of the darkest acts in English history, the Street Bryces Day. Massacre. Believing the Danes living in England were plotting rebellion, he ordered their slaughter. Men, women, and children. Norse settlers who had lived in peace for generations were cut down in their homes. Among the dead was Gunhild, sister of King Swine Forkbeard. It was an atrocity, and it would be avenged. 2 years later, Swine's fleet of vengeance arrived on English shores. Cities burned, armies fled, and the king himself fled into exile in Normandy. For the first time since Alfred's day, England was conquered. When Swine died unexpectedly in 1014, his son Canute, known to the English as Canute, took his place. And this time, England did not resist him. The people, weary of Æthelflæd's chaos, accepted Canute as king. What followed was something no one expected: peace under a Viking crown. Canute ruled not as an invader, but as a statesman. He united Denmark, Norway, and England into one northern empire. He kept the English laws, respected the church, and married Æthelred's widow, Emma of Normandy, binding Saxon and Viking blood in a single royal line. Under his reign, the boundaries between conqueror and conquered dissolved completely. England became part of a northern world Christian, wealthy and strong. When Canute died in 1035, his empire crumbled, but the echoes of his rule remained. His sons' reigns were short and violent, and by 1042 the Old English dynasty was restored under Edward the Confessor, son of Æthelred and Emma. Yet even then, the legacy of the Vikings lived on in law, in language, and in blood. The England that emerged from 2 centuries of conflict was not the same Ireland that faced the first raids on Lindisfarne. It was a fusion of Saxon and Norse, pagan and Christian, fear and endurance. The Viking Age had not destroyed England, it had forged it. But as one chapter closed, another was beginning. Across the Channel, in Normandy, a duke watched England with hungry eyes, a man descended from Norse settlers who had traded raiding for rulership, their longships for castles. His name was William, and his claim to the English throne was about to change the island forever. The Vikings had come by sea. The Normans would come by storm. And when they did, England's story, shaped by 200 years of invasion and defiance, would enter its next and bloodiest age. From the first dragon-proud ships that struck Lindisfarne to the rise of a united England under Alfred, Æthelflæd, Athelstan, and Canute, the story of Viking Britain is one of fire, faith, and transformation. Over 2 centuries, the island was torn apart and reforged. Kingdoms rose and fell, languages intertwined, and the blood of Saxon and Norse flowed together to create something entirely new. What began as chaos became nationhood. The Viking Age did not end with the last raid, it ended with the birth of England itself, an island forever changed by the very people who tried to conquer it. If you've enjoyed walking through the smoke and glory of Viking Britain, don't forget to like this video, it helps more history lovers discover our journey. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next chapter in our deep dives through time. We release cinematic history series every week, each one crafted to immerse you in the sights, sounds, and struggles of the past. We'd love to hear from you. What story should we bring to life next? Should we sail east with the Varangian Guard, march with the legions of Rome in Britannia, or uncover the rise of the Scottish clans after the fall of the Vikings? Drop your ideas in the comments and join the conversation. This channel thrives on your curiosity. Your suggestions shape our next adventure. So, if you crave more tales lit by firelight and told through the echoes of history, make sure you're with us when the next saga begins.